Welcome to Westminster Village's celebration of World Poetry Day. I'm resident Gene England, your host. The concept for this celebration was Jan Cockrell's in her role as Director of Community Life prior to her retirement. She contacted me about organizing the event, and I invited participation of residents here at Westminster. The response was so generous that we are able to present 2 programs. Thanks to the leadership of the new Director of Community Life, Lauren Kelsheimer, we are gathered today to see a video prepared for us by Westminster's answer to Ken Burns, Kate Webster. Part 1 of Village Poetry Day has a local focus. Some residents will share poems of delightful whimsy they've chosen to share with you. After those, we have contributions from residents who are themselves poets. To begin the poetry of whimsy, I'm pleased to introduce resident Mary Halstead.
I'd like to share with you today a poem by A. Milne called Disobedience. I feel as though I'm on a first-name basis with the main character, and I've always thought of this poem as James Morrison. James Morrison, Weatherby George Dupree, took great care of his mother, though he was only 3. James said to his mother, "Mother," he said he, "you must never go down to the end of the town if you don't go down with me." James Morrison's mother put on a golden gown. James Morrison's mother drove to the end of the town. James Morrison's mother said to herself, said she, "I can get right down to the end of the town and be back in time for tea." King John put up a notice, "Lost or stolen or strayed. James Morrison's mother seems to have been mislaid. Last seen wandering vaguely, quite of her own accord, she tried to get down to the end of the town, 40 shillings reward." James Morrison, commonly known as Jim, told his other relations not to go blaming him. James said to his mother, "Mother," he said he, "you must never go down to the end of town without consulting me." James Morrison's mother hasn't been heard of since. King John said he was sorry, so did the Queen and Prince. King John, somebody told me, said to a man he knew, "If people go down to the end of the town, well, what can anyone do?" W.G. Dupree took great C of his M, though he was only 3. J. said to his M, he said he, "You must never go down to the end of the town if you don't go down with me."
Continuing in the same vein, resident Julie Young has some delightful contributions to share.
I also chose a poem by A. Milne. I loved this poem as a child, and I still love it today as an adult. This is King John's Christmas. King John was not a good man. He had his little ways, and sometimes no one spoke to him for days and days and days, and men who came across him while walking in the town gave him a supercilious stare or passed with noses in the air, and bad King John stood dumbly there, blushing beneath his crown. King John was not a good man, and no good friends had he. He stayed in every afternoon, but no one came to tea. And round about December, the cards upon his shelf, which wished him lots of Christmas cheer and fortune in the coming year, were never from his near and dear, but only from himself. King John was not a good man, yet had his hopes and fears. They'd given him no present now for years and years and years. But every year at Christmas, while minstrels stood about, collecting tribute from the young for all the songs they might have sung, he stole away upstairs and hung a hopeful stocking out. King John was not a good man. He lived his life aloof. Alone he thought a message out while climbing up the roof. He wrote it down and propped it against the chimney stack, to all and sundry, near and far, F. Christmas in particular, and signed it not Johannes R., but very humbly, Jack. I did want crackers, and I want some candy. I think a box of chocolates would come in handy. I don't mind oranges, I do like nuts, and I should like a pocket knife that really cuts. But oh, Father Christmas, if you love me at all, bring me a big red India rubber ball. King John was not a good man. He wrote this message out and got him to his room again, descending by the spout. All night he lay there, a prey to hopes and fears. I think that's him a-comin' now. Anxiety bedewed his brow. He'll bring one present anyhow, the first I've had in years. Forget about the crackers, forget about the candy. I'm sure a box of chocolates would never come in handy. I don't like oranges, I don't want nuts, and I have got a pocket knife that almost cuts. But oh, Father Christmas, if you love me at all, bring me a big red India rubber ball. King John was not a good man. Next morning when the sun rose up to tell a waiting world that Christmas had begun, and people seized their stockings and opened them with glee, and crackers, toys, and games appeared, and lips with sticky sweets were smeared, King John said grimly, as I feared, nothing again for me. I did want crackers. I did want candy. I know a box of chocolates would come in handy. I do love oranges. I did want nuts. I haven't got a pocket knife, not one that cuts. But oh, if Father Christmas had loved me at all, he would have brought a big red India rubber ball. King John stood by the window and frowned to see below the happy bands of boys and girls all playing in the snow. A while he stood there watching and envying them all, when through the window, big and red, there hurtled by his royal head and bounced and fell upon the bed an India rubber ball. And oh, Father Christmas, my blessings on you fall for bringing him a big red India rubber ball. And the second poem I'm going to read is by Lewis Carroll from Alice in Wonderland, and it's called You Are Old, Father William. You are old, Father William, the young man said, and your hair has become very white. And yet you incessantly stand on your head. Do you think at your age it is right? In my youth, Father William replied to his son, I feared it would injure the brain. But now that I'm perfectly sure I have none, why, I do it again and again. You are old, said the youth, as I mentioned before, and have grown most uncommonly fat. Yet you turned a back somersault in at the door. Pray, what was the reason of that? In my youth, said the sage, as he shook his gray locks, I kept all my limbs very supple by the use of this ointment. 1 shilling the box. Allow me to sell you a couple. You are old, said the youth, and your jaws are too weak for anything tougher than suet. Yet you finished the goose with the bones and the beak? Pray, how did you manage to do it? In my youth, said his father, I took to the bar and argued each case with my wife, and the muscular strength which it gave to my jaw has lasted the rest of my life. You are old, said the youth. One would hardly suppose that your eye was as steady as ever, yet you balanced an eel on the end of your nose. What made you so awfully clever? I have answered 3 questions, and that is enough, said his father. Don't give yourself airs. Do you think I can listen all day to such stuff? Be off, or I'll kick you downstairs. Thank you.
And now Kurt Winkle, also a resident, will share a poem.
Are you ready for a bit of dark humor? But first, a bit of background. My wife Connie loved to write poems. At the hint of a birthday, a retirement, Valentine's Day, a Christmas letter, or at the end of a community theater production in which she was in many, Connie would dash out a poem. Sometime after the diagnosis of Alzheimer's, she came across this poem that she adopted. It's called My Forgetter by Jim Casey. I think you will find that it speaks to many of us. My forgetter. My forgetter is getting better, but my rememberer is broke. To you, that may seem funny, but it sure isn't a joke. For when I'm here, I'm wondering if I really should be there. And when I try to think it through, I haven't got a prayer. Oftentimes I walk into a room and say, what am I here for? I rack my brain, but all in vain. A 0 is my score. At times I put something away and where it's safe, but the person it's safest from is generally me. When shopping, I may see someone and I say, hi, have a chat. And then when the person walks away, I ask myself, who's that? Yes, my forgetter is getting better while my rememberer is broke. And it's driving me plumb crazy, and that isn't any joke.